I'd like to point out a new procedure, which you pretty much have all excelled at already. I get the impression that my TAs may have offered you assistance, or maybe you're just highly functional students. On the block day before an exam, your warm-up will normally be to packetize your work in the order that it's assigned with the warm-ups on top. You should have 10 warm-ups, because you can also count on the calendar. There have been 10 days leading up to this point. Please look up everything that was in this unit. These were web assignments and something you already gave me. So everything that was stamped is what I collect. The Happy Fishing Post Lab, nothing got stamped for Easter Island, so I got nothing to collect. Tragedy of the Commons, you could turn in the paper that you wrote, the whole packet if it's stamped, or just the single sheet of paper where I stamped a heading with your name on it. 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, and 1-4. Callie, did that work out correctly in the library yesterday? Because I marked you absent here, so they... Now that you have packetized, I'd like everyone to please check your papers to make sure that underneath the stamp is your last name, your first name, the period, and the assignment name. If you don't know the name of the assignment, it's whatever is written in red. Yes?
Do the warm-ups go at the beginning or the end?
They go on top. See? If you don't know what to title your assignment, it's always what's written in red. Like HF Post for the Happy Fishing Post Lab, or TOTC for the Tragedy of the Commons assignment. Yeah?
Are you in front of stamp 1.3 or 1.4 right
No,
now?
no, but my TA's will in a few minutes. What?
What if I just, on the Tragedy of the Commons one, just wrote out Tragedy of the Commons?
That would probably be okay, but... Anybody else? Yeah?
If you have extra notes for the chapters, do you want me to put them in there?
I don't really need those because I'm just checking your stamps. That's why the headings are so important. We don't even know what the work is. We just go by what the heading underneath the stamp is.
Wait, are we doing it today?
No. If it's easier for you to keep everything organized, I don't care what you turn in. So some kids turn in the study guide, the reading packet, all the stuff in one big old stapled bundle. We're just filtering for stamps. Because we just filter for the stamps, the headings are really important. A lot of my students tell me, hey look, I put the name of the assignment in this corner, or in the middle, or down here in the back on the bottom in invisible ink. And I'm sorry, but even if it's clear to you, we just check where the stamp is. Because everybody's notes are different, the stamp is my way of telling the TAs that you were ready that day. And because those staples come apart, they all need your last name first and the period and the assignment. That's all we need. I don't need the date. We all know it's my class. Are there any other questions? Yes?
Do we need to write like a heading for a warm-up for today?
You would need a warm-up for today if you just say packetize. What else? Yes, my TAs will come around and stamp you in a minute. What else? Are we done? How many of you were turned away at the after-school environmental film last night? How many people were turned away at the movie last night because you showed up after 6:06 or whatever? Nobody here? That's convenient. I'm glad that all of you made it on time. In case you didn't know, you have to watch the movie to get the stamp, so once the movie has started, you don't get to come in. A lot of students sent me angry messages last night, including a couple of angry moms. It's always my pleasure to have conversations with all of you and your families. But please keep in mind that the movies like had a start time.
Not gonna happen.
Okay. Hey, look, can I show you how my gradebook works? Check it out. This is exactly how my gradebook works. You already know, I think, that homework 30, classwork 20, exams 50. You all see that? First page of your assignment syllabus. I will pretend to be a calculator for you. The student who's done 100% of all the available points will have a grade of 100%. If they throw down an extra point, now they have 21 out of 20 in the exam category, so that brings them up to a 102.5. Check out student number B. Student number B, homework on time, homework on time, homework on time, homework on time, no assignment, no assignment. Those are missing. Because they missed 2 out of 6 possible homework points, even though they did everything else, their grade comes down to a 90%. If they do extra credit, their grade does not change. Why? You're supposed to know.
Say didn't do all their assignments.
So what? They didn't do all their assignments. What's that got to do with extra credit?
You can't get extra credit if you don't do all your assignments.
Somebody read their extra credit paper. So this kid has a 2.5% bonus sitting in the grade book, and I won't give it to him because it's not instead of those assignments credit. Watch another kid. Same situation, right? They didn't have these stamped, but they go to the trouble of just like putting the stuff on the paper, and then they turn it in. For one thing, they get a quarter credit. How many of you know that you get 1/4 credit when you turn in assignments? Yeah. Okay. So then, they're already starting out at 92.5. And they do that extra credit. For this person, it counts. Look at the difference in these students. They both did the same extra credit. This one's like, oh, well, they're not stamped, so why would I bother? This one's like, I know I didn't get them stamped, but at least I get a little bit of credit and become eligible for that extra credit. So that's a pretty big difference. You want to be this one. Even if you don't get them stamped, you still want to be this student. And OMG, while we're talking about the students that you want to be, if you do all the homework and you don't turn in the warm-ups, they seem so trivial. It's 1/10 of a point. A lot of my students have done the math and been like, wait, 10 warm-ups for 1 point? But that's the classwork category. That populates 20% of your total grade. And there's just not a lot of classwork points, especially in the beginning of this semester. So check out this kid. Because they didn't do the warm-ups, they're just missing that entire 20% category. They've got the worst grade of anybody in my grade book right now. Of course, if they turned in extra credit, it again wouldn't help them because they're just missing that paper entirely. I've been replaced by another rubber chew toy. Get it? That happens a lot. All right. Anybody have questions about the tour of my grade book?
If you, can you add the point to whatever category you want, or does it have to be to?
Exam category only. And unless it's a really weird fluke of mathematics that's exceedingly rare, there's no better place for you anyhow. Yeah?
Was there only one extra credit option this unit? And that was the movie?
The movie. You can also do the, you can turn in submissions for articles or data sets or whatever.
Otherwise they'll be free though, right? You said-
In most movies it's 2, 3, sometimes 4 actually. And you can also do the weekend activities. Once the Green Club gets cranking, that's another 4 points you can throw down. Yeah?
And this was the only unit that the movie was just on Wednesday, right?
I can't make that promise because there are things which break up our flow. Back to school night, I think, is coming soon. That also messes with us. There could be a weird Tuesday or Wednesday activity, like the week of finals. I may not do any at all. I may do just two. So, but most weeks I do a Tuesday and a Wednesday. This week I would have. I just didn't have my volunteers together in time. It's been, as you can tell, it's been a sloppy scramble to this point. Anybody else? I'd like to ensure something for you. Yeah? Theoretically, if this was perfect work, Chloe would have all the answers to the exam tomorrow in this packet. The book is one source of information, but it's not the only source of information. By the way, the lecture is another source, but not the only source. This is designed to aggregate the book, the lectures, and other sources, like the movie and the reader. So theoretically, if everything Chloe didn't know had been added to this packet of paper, this would include a 100% on the exam. My exam is about 30% straight out of the book, never been talked about in class. 30% things that were discussed in class, and 30% other sources, like the reader and the movie. Mathematically, it's very difficult to do well with just the book, just the reader and the movie, just the lectures. But I've told you which notes to write. I'm telling you what to study. This is what to study. If this is really high quality work, that's all you need. And actually, to study in your own writing, having been annotated, having all those secondary memory cues, like you remember what you were doing that day when you had to switch from pencil to pen or whatever. This is really good to reinforce your knowledge. This helps you learn things very well. The foul is party foul. This is my system. I tell you exactly what you need to put on paper. I give you the stuff. I give you credit for getting it ready. I'm available during class to help you make it even better. And then I write the test from my version of this. So my notes are organized with the same questions you have. That's what I use to write the exam. If by some weird coincidence I put something on the exam that isn't in your study guide, I will apologize and I take it off the exam, like question number 12 tomorrow. We're going to skip it. I didn't include that in your study guide this year. So number 12 is out. Retroactively, if you find something in that exam and I check and it wasn't in the study guide, I'll erase it and recalculate all your grades. Yeah?
Are you going to quiz us on like specific facts and numbers that we have to memorize, or just the concepts that are covered by those facts and numbers?
This is kind of crappy. It's pretty detailed. So, you don't, like, memorization and concept is actually kind of a fuzzy line when you get to details. So no, you don't have to regurgitate a definition of a word in explicit order, but you have to know what that word means because I'll embed it in a question about something. It's not explicitly memorizing, so it's not like in which year did that thing happen. There are names you have to know, so that would be memorizing, I guess. What else? Yes?
For the written portion of the exam, do you give partial credit for answers?
No, but let's talk about that test. The AP test in May has 100 multiple choice questions in 90 minutes. And the AP test in May, after a 10-minute break to have a panic attack, gives you 4 free response questions in another 90 minutes. So you have exactly 3 hours of testing time plus the break for 104 free response. Most of my exams are 1/4 of that. So most of my exams ask you 25 multiple choice and a single free response in 1/4 of the time, 22.5 minutes per section. So they train you to the same sort of pace, the same kind of like rhythm, but obviously test day is longer in May. The multiple choice questions are kind of tricky College Board SAT type questions. So instead of being 1 that's obviously right and 4 that are obviously nonsense, they'll be like kind of right, and one of them is more right, or they'll be like require a calculation and knowledge of a term. They're a little bit more high-level thinking than just really simple multiple choice obvious guessing. Anybody have questions for me about the multiple choice section? Yeah?
For the test, if it's something that you didn't teach us, like number 12, if we get it right, is that extra credit?
No, it's not extra credit, and you should try to answer it no matter what. I will take it out after the exam if it was a typo. So unless I tell you to skip it, you should just do your best on the whole test. What else? Yeah?
So is the exam part 50% and then of the test?
In my case, it's 50-50. The two are add up to half. On the AP test, interestingly, it's 60-40. It's just too much of a hassle for us to do that math on our.
But so you can't get partial credit on the written part. So you
Let me clarify that part. The free response questions are graded on a 10-point scale, both on the College Board and in my class. And you can earn 10 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 7, 6, 5. But that doesn't count to me as partial credit. You just picked up 5 of the possible 10 points or 10 of the possible 10 points, but you have to do something explicit to get each of those points. It's a rubric. So imagine, in a question about George Washington, I say, give me 2 facts about his youth, 2 facts about his appearance, and make 3 analyses that connect his political action to our modern society. You'll notice there's some like plain old memorizing, no big deal, like you just gotta know some stuff, like what the thing is and what the thing is, and you get a point for each of those. The rubric would have a list of characteristics, and you just say wood teeth, powdered wig, and like, okay, that's 2 of them, check, check. And then there's usually some higher level things, like you gotta know about his accomplishments and about our society to answer the other one. But still, the rubric grades you on possible answers that you could give, and if you give that answer, you get a check mark, that's 1 point. There's nothing in between the 0 and the 1 point, so there's no like kinda got it. You either earn each of the points or you don't. How many of you understand this method because it resembles something else you've seen in another AP class or another AP test? It's a fairly binary rubric, so if you just do what it says, you get the check mark. And the good thing is, unlike the AP test, you can appeal your scores after the fact. So if we didn't notice that you said the right thing, we'll give you a credit retroactively. If you just say like, oh no, look, I said it right there. Be like, okay, fine, I'll give you that point. We'll go over that appeal process later. One last thing I gotta tell you about the free response test. I'll remind you of this tomorrow before the exam. You don't write an essay. This is not like hamburger format with like an introduction and an outro or whatever. You don't restate the question. You don't need adjectives or adverbs. You just very clearly answer each of the questions like you're being interrogated by the police. Just use a full sentence. George Washington had wooden teeth and a powdered wig, period. That could be 2 points. It's just the facts strung together into a sentence, that's all. No list, no bullets of sentence fragments. You have to have full sentences. I'll remind you of this on test day. It says on the paper, and it says right up there on test day poster. Anybody else? Yes.
Not speaking of the test, if we are for some reason gone when you're showing the movie, when do we come back and make that?
You can come watch it in my class during any lunch that we arrange, or you can check out the film for 24 hours, after which I charge you. Yes?
Do people usually finish the whole test?
Hold on. Or option number 3, you can copy the answers from someone you trust. I warn you that you're building your notes for studying for the exam. So a lot of times somebody might have scribbled some notes that are good enough for them, but not good enough for you to study. So you kind of proceed at your peril with that. Like sometimes, like, oh, I know she takes great notes. She was sitting there. I've read her notes before. She's got all the stuff I would have gotten. So sometimes I should know. Normally, most students complete most of the exams. It's a little bit worse on test day. So at the AP test in May, there's slightly lower completion rate than on my tests in this room. Here we have a big old timer on the screen. And here you have less distractions, like it's a smaller session, so you're not as likely to get snagged up on something. When you've got 100 questions, you'll probably just like run out of steam and bonk out some of those questions and then lose left. Anyway, yeah. These are great questions. I want you to be ready. There is a test tomorrow. My lovely wife. Okay. Okay, the test date is down there. Are we all there? 1.3 and 1.4 need to have a heading in order for my TAs to stamp them. It would look like this. They're going to come around and stamp, while you and I discuss 1.1 and 1.2 first. We're going to go through all 4 assignments in 1 hour. In a normal unit, that would take 2, 3, 4 weeks. But Unit 1 is such a baby unit. It's got so little complicated stuff that we can just slam the whole thing in an hour. Oh, hey, you know what we should do? We should do the stars. Take out your study guide, the printed study guide. This thing. Yeah.
Because we have the movie notes, right, and then also the reading packet.
Yeah.
Do you want them separate, stamped, or just one?
It's one stamp for one assignment. So you can organize those papers however it works for you.
I did the movie notes first, and then the 22.
Hey, let me explain the star
Okay,
concept.
so even if they're not in, okay.
Let me explain this concept with the stars. There are times when the notes that you take on your own are good enough. Like I say, list those 6 things that the book says we're going to think about in the rest of the class. I'm pretty sure that if you just follow the instructions, that's all the notes you need. But there are other times when I'm pretty sure you'll want extra notes, like the tragedy of the commons, for example, your first attempt notes are probably not going to be good enough. Or the definition of megacities, like your first pass at the notes might not be good enough because some students were confused about two different definitions and it's actually 10 million. For those items where your notes might not be adequate, I point it out to you and say, hey, look out, here's a part of the study guide where you might need check with another friend, check in class, whatever. Those are the stars. The entire study guide's on the exam, but some parts just require a little bit more care in the note taking. Those are the stars. Are we clear about this idea? Here comes that list. If you go in the study guide, I'll go in order of your printed study guide. So you can put a little star next to these. Here we go. Put a little star next to tragedy of the commons, megacities, the different variable terms, dependent, independent, manipulated, respondent. Model. These are just in order in the vocab section. Like on the very front at the top. So that was tragedy, megacities, the variables, and model. Now starting with the study goals. Number 2, number 3. Two, 3, 6, 7, 8.
Wait, is it 7 and 8?
6, 7, right?
14, 16, 18, 19, 20, 28, 34, 38.
I just missed that.
Stuff on the exam will have no stars, will have stars. The stars has nothing to do with what's on the exam. The entire study guide's on the exam. But the stars is like, yo, heads up, double check your notes. Where did we, oh yeah, sorry, what?
Sorry, did you say you were going to do that every time?
I do that in every unit. If I fail to do that, check the videos on YouTube, come to another class, or ask me during class. I intend to do that in every unit. Yeah?
If you're not here the day of the test, you just take it the day you get back.
That's right. If you're not here the day of the test, you take it your first day back.
And
You can take it anytime you choose on your first day back. So if you're absent tomorrow, you can take it periods 1, including lunch, through 5 on your first day back, Monday, Tuesday, whatever day you get back. You can also take the test anytime on test day. So if you can't come to period 2, you can come to periods 1, 3, 4, 5 on test day. Nobody can ever take it early. You can't take it today. Yeah?
You can turn on your packet the day after.
That's right. Whenever you want it to be accurate, you give it to me. No playing with the dog, Charlie. He has to work. Also, Leah's no fun.
Fuck you.
I'll fight you, Leah. I'll fight you right now.
I'm down.
You think I'm afraid to hit a girl? I'm not. I'm not. Where did we get on assignment 1.1 the last time we were in class? I probably told you to leave a little mark somewhere.
We didn't really go through it.
None of it? Any vocab questions on assignment 1.1?
Also, can you go over the moral yesterday? Not stay recording.
Megacities are 10 million, not just 8 million. There was some confusion in the book. 2 definitions. It's actually 10 million nowadays.
Yeah, I should.
Can you define sustainability?
Not really. It's kind of it's a complicated concept. The theoretical possibility of sustainability is anything you can keep doing forever. So if you can keep doing it forever, it's said to be sustainable. Like you can sustain it. What else? No?
Carrying capacity?
The maximum population size that an environment or a system can support. You may find a better definition somewhere, but that's how I define it. Yeah?
What's the planning time horizon?
What?
I was kind of confused on the planning time horizon thing.
Oh, so how far out can you actually plan things? So planning time horizon is like how far out can you make a prediction and plan for it? Callie, this kind of matters because like our management system for nuclear waste is like, oh, well, we've got a really good plan that lasts 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. That nuclear waste is going to be nasty in some cases for like 1.4 billion years. Like, we can't plan for that. So, like, you know, we can't put it in a container that'll be good that long. So we can only plan for so much, and then things might keep happening. That's the idea of the planning time horizon, how far out you can see into the future in your plans. Yeah?
Is the polluter pay system like actually paying money, or like the effect of polluting?
Generally, it's being responsible for the concept. So you could pay with money, or you could pay by being the one who runs the disposal system. Like in Denmark, all paint waste management is handled by paint companies. They don't pay someone else to handle their waste, but they cover the cost of that waste management, which they run also. But you're going to assignment 1.2, young lady. Temper your ambitions, please. I want to point out in study goal number 2, where you drew that nice little shape. Look at me. Population is level, population is growing. 1970s, population grew at the steepest rate. Did we already talk about this? It feels like we did. We did. Population growth slows. Will probably flatten out in your lifetime. Did we talk about that?
It's gonna flatten out because people, like why would it flatten out?
I got a whole unit to discuss this with you. If you're taking human geography because of development, because we know that people don't necessarily enjoy when they have the option giant unlimited family growth. We know that at a certain quality of living, actually population tends to go down because there are more people choosing not to have children than people choosing to have more than 2. Because we know that if women are presented with other options, they usually will postpone first childbearing until they get to like a certain point in their life, and for many women that sort of limits their maximum fertility potential. And there's a whole unit to discuss this there. Oh, 3, 4, 5, probably no big deal unless you have questions. 6 I want to talk about.
I have a question about
Yeah.
2.
Yeah, 2.
When I'm talking about like feeding the hungry or preserving the environment. I
Yeah.
feel like there's like a, not like a correct answer, but like
Do you have a question?
beneficial. I'm just wondering what you think is more beneficial.
What do I think is more beneficial? I would feed the last panda bear to a starving child any day. I can't imagine looking at a human need and saying, sorry, I care more about panda bears or about whales or whatever. As a matter of fact, I think I really do want to believe that we're all in this together and that we should really be taking care of each other. Push comes to shove, I don't know that I would. Like if it's between 2 humans, I want to be the one that wins. But if it's between humans and the environment, I choose humans every day. Anybody want to ask? And that's just an opinion. That's not the right answer here.
No, yeah, I know.
Any questions on this? I'd like to look at number 6. And this was the warm-up that we skipped. There was a warm-up on the board on Tuesday that said, Why is there so much difference when people estimate the Earth's carrying capacity? Why is there? Why do some people say less than 1 billion and some people say 20 billion? That's a pretty big difference. We really don't know that much about the planet. Like if I have a jar with agar in it, I can tell you the maximum amount of bacteria. Like that's a clear number. Why can't we figure this out for humans? Why?
Because there's a certain quality of life that some people want to uphold, and that creates a smaller carrying capacity. Whereas if we all like gave up a bunch of stuff, we could probably have a lot more people.
Got a lot more people. How many of you saw the Keanu Reeves movie called The Matrix? How many of you remember that scene where he wakes up? Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! If you haven't seen it, you should probably watch it. It's really a lot of fun. Cover your ears. Spoiler alert. How many of you saw that scene where there's like the glass thing in the very scary apocalyptic future, and he wakes up inside that glass thing and opens the little jar, and he's like floating in juice, and he unplugs from the Matrix? How many of you saw that scene? You remember that part? So that's actually ripped off of another book, I think. I haven't read that other book. It's not written in English. But someone told me about that other book. And in that original book, the idea is, kind of like in The Matrix, that as human population grows, humans design a machine that optimizes the number of people. So you start to farm the earth, sucking all productivity out of the ocean and raising all of the land productivity and grinding that all to feed humans through a little straw. Humans are packed in like sardines in these silos where they're not allowed to move, they're not allowed to talk, because that would be a waste of calories. You can imagine that's the ultimate number. What is Earth's carrying capacity? Well, if you stopped burning calories with all of these things that you do for fulfillment, and could just barely stay alive on a few hundred calories a day that were fed through a tube and another tube took away all the waste product to fertilize the Earth's productivity again, we could fit 20 billion humans maybe? You'd be all like pale and like nude and just sitting there hating life. But we could pack more humans. People always ask me, how many is too many? I'm like, it's never too many. We'll never see that number. Way before we ever get to that, someone's like, I could just take some of her stuff and give her a worse quality of life to get my better quality of life. And this is like the horrific consequence of the ability to get ahead, I guess. I don't know. Hey, I can tell you one thing. If everybody was going to live like a sub-Saharan nomad, hunter-gatherers who moved, like, remember those dudes in the beginning of the movie? Our planet could probably sustain forever somewhere in the ballpark of 15, 17 billion humans. We could more than double the world's population. And they could all live like those homies, and everything would be fine. That number could probably go more or less forever, give or take. If we were going to live like the average rural, like backcountry Indian, like person from the country called India, maybe 12 to 15 billion, we could roughly double human population. And I'll take that quality of life. But if everybody was going to live like the average American, we'd have to get rid of about 6 billion humans today. And if you live in Santa Barbara and you consider that the average, we would probably have to get rid of about 6.5 billion today. Maybe more, I'm not really sure. Just kind of guesstimating that. My hunch is that as Santa Barbarans on average, we have at least double the average Americans resource footprint. Because we really raised that average quite a bit. It's nice here. Some of us live pretty rich lives. I got a bow. How many of you are tired of this conversation and you get what I'm saying? At least get what I'm saying? Number 7, check your numbers. Yo, bro.
5.
Yeah, totally. My interpretation of this is we should never use the word save the planet. I know what we mean by that. I say it all the time. But what I really mean is not saving the planet, because we can't really get rid of the planet. Like, the planet isn't really going anywhere. The planet's going to keep planeting. You know what I mean? Like the whole rock with like water and gases twirling around, like that's going to keep going. And life, in terms of like things living that will keep evolving and changing, that's going to keep going too. Extinction happens all the time. 99.8% of all species that have ever existed on this earth are already extinct. We just live in one moment of diversity. But diversity is a long-term path, so the planet's going to be fine. We can scramble the climate. Who cares? What, 15,000, 100,000, 200,000, 1 million years from now, it's going to go stable no matter what we do. You know what I'm saying? Drop all the nukes! Like something will survive and life goes on, the planet's just a little blip. I think we should say save the humans. Because that's really what's at stake here. I think we've really like pooped where we eat, so to speak. Does that answer your question for number 5? Is that what you saw in number 5?
Yeah.
Was that what you meant?
Yeah.
Number 7, I want everybody to check their numbers. In number 7, theoretically, if you're a good student and you did all the homework, you've got some numbers. I want to make sure that you got it right because it like switches the order in the book. In developed countries, 75% of people are urban. In developing countries, like countries that are not at that same standard of life, 40% of humans live in cities. By the year 2065, 2/3 of humanity will live in cities. 67%?
65 or 2025?
Well, I don't know what I said. 2025, 67% of humans will live in cities. Thank you for catching that. I fumble my speech all the time. You always should check.
Yeah.
By the year 2025, the percentage of 67 of humans will live in cities, urban. And you know, you were alive when the scales tipped for the global average. When you were born, humans were primarily rural. I hate that word. Juror. I'm a juror in a rural county. When you were born, most humans were rural. In the year 2008, 50-50, by your 9th birthday, humanity was primarily a city species. Was there a hand somewhere when I said numbers? You should look at number 8. That makes a big difference. Cities are really different. We could theoretically make things better in cities. And sadly, the unfortunate reality is that in most of our cities, things are not actually better. We have the opportunity to be more efficient with our waste and our distribution, and our food production. But cities just seem to give us like more room for places to go wrong, and cities tend to be like really nasty and like heavily polluted and unpleasant and dangerous places to live. It's sort of surprising. Sort of missed the bus on that one. The precautionary principle. Does anybody know like a common figure of speech that is a good way to paraphrase the precautionary principle? I challenge you to come up with like a other way to say that. Yeah.
You're like the cart and the horse thing.
I don't know about carts and horses.
No, it's like don't.
I'm afraid of horses.
Like, it's like don't put the cart in front of the horse or. I think the precautionary principle is yes, put the horse in front of the cart. I'm not sure that that's the best one. I don't know.
Maybe it works. I don't know. Maybe it works. Since I don't use that phrase very much, I'm not sure that I've really thought about its implications. You might be spot on. What's another way?
Maybe just like wait, don't mess this up, you might need it in the future.
Okay, yes?
In the Cinderella story, she goes into the locker room and is like waiting for you in this, oh shoot. Like waiting for you
everyone is like waiting for
water
you
in
in
this
drought.
drought. It's disappointing.
I know,
But it like has to do with
And
What is happening here?
waiting for science. And you just be Hillary Duff and do it.
that's not what she should have said.
We live in different places. I don't know your words. What is this?
Trust me, it works.
What is this Hillary Duff you speak of?
Have you not seen the Cinderella story? It's on Netflix. It's on Netflix now, yeah.
My daughter's kind of on a media blackout.
This is my favorite movie of all time.
It'll change her life. She will not know boys.
Yeah, but Chad
This is a fascinating conversation that I wish we could have, but the test is still tomorrow, so I want to have to step away from it.
Make a fair point.
How about this one? Better safe than sorry? Anybody know that? How about check yourself before you wreck yourself?
Wait, what question are you talking about?
I'm talking about the precautionary principle, and this is important. So if these words aren't helping you, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's kind of an old-timey one. Look, here's the idea. You gotta play it safe with things. If something might be bad, you probably don't want to do it just in case. Like, you might be one of those people who can quit heroin, but let's not find out, because it would suck to find out the hard way. Or I tell my children, if you ever see a gun, assume that it's loaded, because you don't want to find out the hard way. So there's this thing called climate change. And it happens naturally all the time. And it appears that humans have figured out how to accelerate climate change. And some people discuss this as a thing that is doubtful. Even if it was a thing that is doubtful. Shouldn't we probably play it safe, just in case? That's the precautionary principle. Play it safe, just in case. Like, yeah, maybe we can address climate change before things get really bad, and maybe the predictions aren't as bad as some people say, but shouldn't we just play it safe, just in case? I hope I'm not mixing too many metaphors, but if you'll forgive my gun analogy, we've treated climate change like a possibly loaded gun, and we keep pulling the trigger. Yeehaw. Yosemite Sam. Well, how's it go? That's how we've treated the climate change discussion. Like, who knows if it's bad? Just in case, let's do it a lot, really fast, recklessly. How many of you understand my mixed metaphor about the guns and the Yosemite Sam and the And we keep doing it. It's like playing Russian roulette to find out if the gun is loaded. So number 10, there's a lot of reasons to value an environmental resource. You have to know these terms. Utilitarian is for human benefit. Like save the kelp because I like to roll around in kelp and get all slimy. Or ecological, that's when there's a connection inside of nature that you've noticed, some connectedness. Like save the kelp, it's important to the otters. You just state that there is a connection to something else, that's all. don't want to confuse anybody, but those are not exclusive terms. So you can say, save the kelp, it's important for the otters, I'd like to hunt them and make nice jackets with the otters. That is ecological and utilitarian. And if you have fun while hunting otters, it's also recreational. And if you believe that's specific to your cultural identity, that's also cultural. Like I'm Argentinian, we're just really into pelt. And if you believe something is just the right thing to do, then that's a moral one. These terms come up a lot. So how can I help you? Anybody want to ask me? Aesthetic, yeah?
For aesthetic, I don't know about off is it just like because it's pretty?
Yep, that's all there is to it. That, like, you have to wonder, like, why does that matter, right? Like, so, okay, so what? So aesthetic is usually based on some sort of utilitarian benefit. You can mix these. You can say, save the kelp because it supports fish that people like to scuba dive and see. Ecological, aesthetic, utilitarian. And by the way, I'm going to make money off those people. That's economic utilitarian. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah?
What would be an example of a cultural justification for, say, kelp beds per se?
I don't know about kelp beds. You could say that they're important in my religion, which is specific to my nation of origin. Better examples, especially in the United States, are we have a lot of protected indigenous nations here. Many of them have special value to something which is not necessarily utility. Oh, like Americans with the bald eagle. We don't eat the bald eagle, but it is like a cultural American thing. By the way, like California condor is really important to people who live in California before it was called California. Like killer whales in Alaska have a variety of cultural importance. They like, when you see the killer whales doing a certain behavior, it like triggers a season of celebration of something or other up there, I don't really know. Anybody else? For kelp, it's kind of a stretch for kelp. Are there any questions on assignment 1.1 at all? This is how it works. I go over the ones I want to talk about. I assume you're okay with the rest. You stop me if you're not okay with the rest. What about 1.2? Vocab on 1.2? Yeah. Oh, scientific method is this thing you might have learned in like the 7th or 8th grade, which is like the steps. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Where you like observe something that leads you to make a hypothesis that you state as something which is not false, and you try to make truth. I don't know, man. Hey, here's the good news. You can forget about the scientific method for the most part in this class. There are disciplines where the scientific method is kind of the only way to make scientific progress. And there are elements of the scientific method in all science. But you'll see later in the study goal coming up ahead that the scientific method is very difficult to apply or impossible to apply in our field. There are many topics that we just can't treat with the usual scientific method. What else? Other questions? Okay, yeah.
11.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, fine. 11, we have to decide what's important. Bringing more water to Los Angeles or preserving the largest seagull nesting area in North America. You can't have both. Because the water that we take out of the upper Owens drainage from Bridgeport all the way down to like Lee Vining, that down to June Lake, that water can either go to maintain water levels in Mono Lake, and when you leave the water up high, the coyotes can't swim far enough to reach all the nesting seagulls, or we take that water from Los Angeles, that's nice for people, And then Mono Lake goes down, and you can build a land bridge that the coyotes can walk across and eat all the baby seagulls, and you get no more seagulls. It's just like a really simple setup. Not everything has to be humans versus nature, but at some point we have to choose, like, do I want to take this resource, or do I want to leave it for the fishies, or do I want to leave it for the seagulls, or do I want for coyotes? If you ever want to talk about Mono Lake, I live right next to that every summer for the last 18 years, and we can talk about it more, but not right now. Other, let's see, study goals, 12, 13, hey, number 14. Why is no measurement perfect? Yeah.
Because like measurements are like infinite number of decimals. So
That's right. I really like that way to answer this. I haven't heard anybody say it that way. A perfect measurement has an infinite number of decimals. Do you understand what I'm saying by that? If I measure her with the back of a yardstick, she's 2 yardsticks, that's 6 feet. But if I turn around the yardstick where it's got numbers, I might realize that she's... What? That she's 5'5". And then if that yardstick has like little lines, I might say, oh, she's actually 5'4 3/4. But if I have more little lines, I might say, oh, she's 5'4 27 30 And if I like bring out a big old micrometer, I can give you more detail, give you a more accurate measurement, but it's never going to be perfect because I can always make a better instrument. So like our understanding of space keeps changing because we come up with like better tools to measure what's going on in space, and it's like, whoa, look at this, that changes our understanding of space. And every scientist already knows this. This is like old news for every carpenter knows this. You know, you can only get so perfect. Funny thing is, the public doesn't understand it, and they get really bitter when science keeps changing. Like, our understanding is improving. This is probably better. And people are like, oh, you scientists, you keep making stuff up all the time. You said sea level would rise 10 feet, and you were wrong. So yeah, we're just trying to get better. That's, you know, trying to understand better measurements, better yardstick. You could argue that science is the pursuit of a more perfect measurement. Number 16, we talked about the scientific method in this science. I'm guessing you already have this in your notes. The time frames of environmental science are often outside of the scope of a human life. Like to find out how long it takes for the planet to recover from humans' addition of greenhouse gases, we can't answer that for a very, very long time. It'll be a long, long time until we can answer that. We won't really know how long it takes until that's settled in the long, distant future. Thousands of years from now, we'll all be dead by then, so who cares about that question? We can't do the traditional scientific method because there's so many variables on our planet that all interact. We don't even know how many variables, let alone how they all interact. It's a very complicated system. And unfortunately, we can't really do environmental science experiments on the whole environment because we only have one. For everybody who treats climate change like a system of doubts, we could settle it right now. Just have the planet with the humans make an identical Earth without the humans and use a thermometer. But we don't have the ability to control group this experiment. We are living in the experiment. Imagine if I investigated anatomy by cutting myself open. That's environmental science. Like the best metaphor for environmental science is, I wonder what this thing does. Oh dang, I needed that. Dying. So all that stuff you know about scientific method and stuff, that's totally how we test the validity of medicines, and that's how we understand the structure of what's inside an electron or whatever, but that's not really how we understand the entire planet. We understand the entire planet by just trying to watch what's going on, and that's why it's so important to play it safe. Hey, that's why we have to model things. What's a model in day-to-day conversation among the homies? Like, what's a model when you talk to people about models? Really, like a little kid who has like a model B-52 bomber. What is that? Is it a whole B-52 bomber? It's what? It's a toy that is what? Scaled down. Not in science. It's a scaled down B-52 bomber that looks just like a B-52 bomber, right? But in science, that's actually not the thing. This falls, I apologize in advance. I was going to get it. I've been waiting for it to fall. All right, watch this, kids. Later on this year, you're going to have to make a passive solar design for a home, and then you'll model that design. But you're not going to B-52 model it like a toy that looks just like the thing. You're going to science-y model it. And in science, a model is different. So this kid was trying to model a green roof. Raise your hand if you know what a green roof is. When you put vegetation on top of a house? Okay. This kid was trying to model a green roof. They put a little rag of towel on top of a weird aluminum thing. And this kid was trying to model a green roof. They got this like neat foam stuff that looks just like plants and put it on top of their house. Which one of these captures the look and feel of a green roof? Which one of these is a scientific model of a green roof? Believe it or not. Because a scientific model, you may want to write this down, simplifies a complex system to better understand its function. Yeah, it simplifies a complex system to better understand its function. Why do you sweat? Why am I sweating so effing much right now? Yeah.
Cool down.
It's a body cooler. How does that cool you?
Water evaporating and taking away heat with it.
That's right. The phase change of liquid water to vapor water takes heat energy away from your dome piece to those floating water molecules. How many of you have heard that basically? In case you're not clear, that molecule has an energy level. When you give it more of your brain's heat energy, it becomes water vapor and leaves. That's the whole point. Your body puts the water there so that your heat energy will leave the brain. It's a coolant system. That's what this kid saw. You get this thing wet. You put it on top of that aluminum foil. And now, the heat inside the house transfers across metal, which is a good conductor of heat, to the water, which is in this high surface area piece of terry cloth. That will allow that water to evaporate, and those water molecules will phase change, take away the heat of the home. It works like a green roof. It doesn't look like a green roof, but it captures the function. It simplifies something complicated so you can test that function. Add more water, you should be able to cool off the house, and hey, it works. For example, climate change. Let's capture a few of the variables of our atmosphere, like albedo of clouds, how shiny they are, reflectivity of the ground, what color our Earth's surface is, and the presence of heat-trapping greenhouse gases. You can take away some of those variables, and now you can use those thermometers to measure the heat when you leave these out in the sun. And guess what? This model of our atmosphere lets us test variables like what happens with or without clouds, what happens with or without greenhouse gases. That's the wacky thing about environmental science. We can't play with the whole environmental. So we have to science a little simplification of that. We have to model a lot. Ask me other questions. I'm done with 1.2 unless you want to talk more about it. Okay, what about 1.3 vocab? 1.3 didn't have a lot of vocab. 1.3 vocab questions? Ask me, ask me, ask me. What? Thanks, brother. Yes.
Natural capital.
So does anybody know what capital means in the investment banking world and the economics? What's capital?
The money you would start out with, like your initial investment.
Yeah, money that you can use for something. It's money that's available to do things. Natural capital is the stuff in nature that's available to do things. So if your salmon river has more salmon than mine, your salmon river has more natural capital because you've got more stuff that you can use. There's a lot of ways to use that stuff. So you could say that if your local beaches have more kelp, then your local beaches have more natural capital because I can make more fish, for example. Sorry. No other vocabs? Yeah?
What's like the shortest way to explain public service function?
Cool stuff that nature does for free. And you should have a list in there about like pollinating our flowers so we have a better peach harvest. And like having the bats that eat the mosquitoes so we don't all get malaria. That's cool stuff that nature does for free. Public service functions. But I want to add one that your book didn't mention. I'd like you all to add. Is that a study goal? What one?
18.
In number 18, I'd like you to add one that your book didn't have. Healthy ecosystems do something else that's really neat. They have prospect value. Like, we might find something cool when we look later. Prospect value. People say we should preserve the rainforest because the cure for cancer might be in there somewhere. Or a wonder medicine to address impotence might be in there. Keep in mind, we cured malaria by finding something in the bark of some tree or something. Am I making that up? Quinine? Am I making that up? Did we cure malaria? Quinine? Malaria pills? Okay, fine, I'm making that up. What?
So prospect value, the value that it is once you find the thing that you're prospecting.
Yeah, it's the potential. It's undiscovered potential. You know how a prospector is somebody who's looking for a gold mine?
Yeah.
Okay, so prospect value is nature's potential gold mine of useful medicine, useful industrial designs, useful food crops that we don't eat yet. But somebody's like, oh, you can eat these, and we like selectively bred, and now we have tomatoes. I think that's actually a really bad example. That's not really got tomatoes. Anybody else? Yeah. You are the quietest human being, Olivia.
What is polluter pay system?
Polluter pay system is a system where the polluter pays. as opposed to ones where we all have to pay. So like, if you dump your oil in the ocean, we all have to pay. So we support a system where you just take it to the right spot, and that's run by the cost of buying oil. Polluter pay systems, as opposed to one where we all pay for you. Like, climate change is not a polluter pay system. Climate change is the future pays system. I can make all the greenhouse gases I want. I do not pay for those. You, the future, will pay for them. Which is a really good system for me. Just sucks for you. Could we talk about this? The number 20, direct, indirect, external, internal. Polluter pays or everybody pays? For the sake of conversation, I'm going to call this a $10 mug at Starbucks, okay? I don't know how much they actually cost, it doesn't matter. When I bought this for Starbucks, did Starbucks make $10 profit from me? Did I just give them money and they sold me a free mug? When I gave them $10, some of that was profit. Given that it's Starbucks, I'm going to guess about 25–30%. So $2.50, $3 goes into the corporate till. What's the other $7.50? Yeah.
The cost to produce that model.
Okay, and so what costs would that be? Yes?
Extraction, manufacturing, the payment of the employees.
What else? Keep going.
Shipping.
Shipping? Anybody can think of anything else? That was good. That was really fun. What else?
The rubber and
Yeah, like the rubber in the thing, like the plastic, the utilities of the factory, the healthcare costs of the factory workers. There's like a little share. You know, okay. We call those internal expenses. The guy who makes the lid has to pay the healthcare cost of his employees, and so every lid includes a little tiny bit of that price. When you pay $10 to Starbucks, you've basically checked off like 0.01 cents in the lid manufacturer's healthcare costs, or whatever. Those are called internal costs. That is captured in the transaction. When I give Starbucks money, that money goes back up to their chain of supply, to the guy who paid the healthcare, to the health insurance company. That's all internal. You find all those things in the budget. Presumably when you buy a cell phone, that's part of the price. You pay for the packaging and the healthcare costs for the people at the factory at Foxconn and wherever that's made or whatever. Now comes the interesting part. There are some costs that aren't factored. Like, I'll use my favorite example because this is the most obviously stupid one. The extraction of this causes emissions that will change your climate. The shipping of this stuff causes emissions that will change your climate. And you know that climate change is currently having, but will have, significant, real, actual costs. They're not make-believe costs. They are real costs. Like for Santa Barbara, if sea level rises by 3 feet over 100 years, we're going to have to pay more to dredge the harbor. We're going to have to go through a citywide reorganization of our wastewater system. We'll have to upgrade the pumps to push the water uphill to leave the wastewater plant. We're going to have, if sea level rises 3 feet over 100 years, we're going to have to reroute traffic or lift the freeway over by City College on what's that street that they keep, it's always wet? When you go under
Rio or
Castillo.
that one. Castillo.
Castillo.
Caprio Stillo. Stilio. There are real costs for the climate change that we will face. And this mug is responsible for some percentage of that, but that math is really complicated, so we just don't capture that in this transaction. That's a real cost. We just aren't trying to figure out how to pay for it yet. We're all going to pay for it later. This becomes more important when I discuss a more obvious decision. Sophia, so much note-taking on your cell phone is exhausting. You should use pencils, it's easier. Hatred face. Let's imagine that she drives a big ass like truck with like the suspension and like the big knobby tires. She feels bad about herself and needs to drive the biggest possible vehicle to feel more manly or whatever. And she rides a bike. You all realize that because she rides a bike, she's wearing away the roads less. Does that make sense? Because the bike doesn't really wear out the asphalt very much. But her 2-ton behemoth with giant rubber wheels that are like this and like that tall, and she's got like the roll down ladder to like get up to like the control center. Her big ass truck, every time she drives, just chunks of asphalt go flying away. You know what's interesting? We have ways to charge her more for road repair. Because she buys gasoline, a fraction of her gasoline cost goes into fixing the roads. And her little tiny super efficient Honda Civic doesn't use that much gasoline, so she doesn't pay that much for the road maintenance. You know what's funny? When you buy rubber, all tires have like an extra rubber cost. So little tiny tires, Honda Civic tires, big ass tires, she pays more road repair because we know that she's probably using up more rubber, which means she's using up more asphalt, friction. When she registers her car, the weight of the car means she pays more expensive registration, and that's important because the bigger car will wear out the roads, and so that registration fee has a chunk that goes back to repair the roads. Do you all see how we can capture road repair costs proportionally to road damaging? We don't capture any difference in their climate change costs. She's causing very little or no climate change with her bike. She's causing less middle of the road with her Honda Civic. She's causing tons with her big old macho truck. She should be paying more for the future climate change costs, but she's not. We haven't found a way to internalize climate change costs. They are indirect costs. I gotta point something out, and you should probably put this in your notes. Indirect costs are not imaginary. It's not make-believe. Indirect costs are underlined, all caps, bold, real costs. They're just not captured in the transaction that generates the cost. It's like all of us paying the health insurance for the guy who works at Starbucks, even if we don't buy the Starbucks mug. When we talk about climate change, this becomes really crappy for you all. Your generation will get that bill. Like, the cost of food production is going up, availability of fresh water is going down, extreme weather events are becoming more common. Maybe you've noticed. sea level is rising, like all these things are known and it's real and all the data's out there. So that's gonna cost money. And hopefully, I'll be dead when all of you are paying for it. Yes. I managed to get a credit card where the bills are sent to your house in 50 years. By externalizing the cost of climate change, they will be internal to your economy, but they don't even exist in my economy. I can buy any car I want and not have to consider the difference in costs. You'll figure it out.
How much is the ocean rising?
Say it again, please.
How much is the ocean rising?
Well, a lot of it's slowed down because we're currently trapping a lot of water in reservoirs. It's kind of interesting. But probably it's gone up by about 2.75 inches or so. You're about to see like a steep part of sea level change in the next like 30 years.
How much will it go up?
It's really difficult to say. This is one of those places where predictions are really complicated. It's a very complex system. The leading guess today, like the best measurements we can predict right now, are 3 feet over 100 years. Hey, if anybody wants to stick around for a minute, I never got to answer your study goal or movie questions. I assume most of those are pretty direct, but if you'd like to ask me, I'm available. Okay.
Just up around there. You tired? Max, stop
Can you turn out? Yeah.
Is he like not?
Yeah.
I'm not.
Will you stop the screaming, please?